released their open letter about the struggles they've had getting a game on, basically, even though they've been part of a league. No one turns up to their games because they've kind of been pushed into a league that are a little bit further away from because other teams have disbanded. And then, you have things like the Coventry Bears making a public thing out of the lack of Sky Tri funding that has now had to. And that's not a Sky issue. This is a way the RFL distribute the money that was given for that programme issue, as far as I understand it.
Yeah.
For development officers, now we know that the RFL sacked off too many development officers over a cycle of a number of years now, and the Sky Tri initiative was working. It was getting kids involved. It was, we were seeing kids, even if they were doing dancing and stuff at games, they were involved in rugby league, getting inspired at big events on the big stage and that sort of thing. And it was giving access to a lot of ability for clubs, particularly the smaller clubs in development areas, to be getting people out there. And all of this stuff has happened during the period of time where Ralph Rimmer has been involved. And basically all he's done is have a fucking couple of coffees with two guys that are more out for themselves than they are for the sport. And I don't doubt Ralph Rimmer really cares about rugby league and really loves rugby league and wants the best for rugby league. What I do doubt is his ability to lead the sport through this time.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that league never struggles for enthusiasm; it struggles for competence in management. In my head, people, you just have to see the current goings on at lower league clubs in terms of financial conduct and that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
It lacks competent management, and a chief operating officer is that kind of head manager, isn't he? He should be pulling these departments together and making sure that there's a coherent business plan. Your chief executive is there. He's your leader, isn't he? He's your figurehead, and those roles don't necessarily naturally match with each other anyway. You can be a great chief operating officer and never want a chief executive role. So there's questions there, but I don't think he was an outstanding chief operating officer either. So underwhelming to say the least.
Yeah, it does it does strike us a bit of in-house business, shuffling the deck but not really doing anything. Shuffling the chairs on the deck, is that the saying as the Titanic sinks? Or
rearranging the deck chairs on the
Titanic,
isn't it? Yeah.
And one of the other big stories that came out towards the back end of last week that kind of links into this first story really, but is the Rugby Football League will report losses of 2.09 million for 2017. It said the loss was budgeted for in a year without any home international fixtures, along with sizable investment in infrastructure and the international setup. The RFL said the autumn test series against New Zealand and in inverted commas improved commercial deals should see them record a surplus in 2008. They released quite a lengthy statement with a breakdown of a lot of the things. We've seen a devaluation of the Odsal Stadium. It almost feels like they've held on to that for a while to devalue it in a year where they're already going to be reporting badly, so that they can spin some other positives for the next year's accounts and keep the Odsal devaluation on last year's books. To me, there's the Nigel Wood figure of his severance package for someone who apparently parted ways mutually. Well, he didn't. We said this at the time back at Christmas, I think, maybe when me and Tom did a podcast and spoke about it. He was fired. Quite clearly he was fired. This severance package makes that absolutely clear that he was fired. Yet they've continued to rehire him as a consultant to do a report on the New York bid, which has not materialised whatsoever. So what he's done with that money, I'm not sure. I can just, all I can picture is him and Eric Perez. Like, is that the guy's name? The guy who came along with the Toronto journey at the start, but now has disappeared a little bit. Them two just, I don't know, living the high life somewhere. That's all I can picture with what's going on with that situation. It's disappointing. Their explanations were there. They pointed out just how shitty it was, and there was some mitigation to it as well. And there is some clear stuff, that we're seeing come through. I mean, for a starter, there's New England sponsorship deals with Dacia and with Ronseal and stuff, as well as the international series that's going to be coming up and that sort of stuff, and things like the double header for the Challenge Cup semi-finals and those sorts of things. But it's disappointing, isn't it, that there's such a big loss after years of reporting profits.
Yeah, I mean, what I don't, I mean, I didn't, other the headline things, but obviously what Wood got and the devaluation of Odsal, which, you know, they didn't need to revalue it this year. You know, the ground hasn't changed substantially. It's still a big hole, and it will continue to be so. But it is
with parts of the ground being closed off for a longer period of time. There's probably there's going to be investment needed for sorting out what used to be the away end, I would think, at some point now, and things like that. So there is things like that you can see in your head. There'll be needed to be upgrades and improvements, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those complicated situations that they did spend a lot of money on renewing the concreted steps and stuff like that, you know, kind of in the past they've spent a lot of money on that kind of stuff, but it is ultimately a money pit because it just degrades in the weather up there.
And no one wants to buy it now to build houses on it, which will devalue.
Well, I was going to say that the 850,000 to me isn't the you know the terracing and all that kind of stuff. It's the value of the square acreage, isn't it? And maybe that's been revalued in terms of the area and that kind of expectation of profitability on housing in that area. That kind of stuff might have more to do with the
if other areas of land locally have been opened up for development on, it means that the thirst for that part of land, which will be costly to redevelop with the shape and rolling nature of it, you would think, has been rethought.
Yeah, well, they've built hundreds of houses literally just on the next plot, for want of a better word. So that they've all been put there on, which I think that plot was possibly part of the original plan because when they had plans to turn the pitch round 90 degrees, it was like the next bit of land that they were going to take to change that stuff around. But that's all been built on in terms of residential housing now. Yeah. So in terms of, and obviously what you don't know is what the value of those were, how much, what the demand for those houses were, all that kind of stuff, which all influences the value of the land, really, which is what it's about.
Do you think there's been an issue with the way the valuation of that asset has been managed, and do you think they're devaluing it themselves by not utilising it more?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, obviously it's only used, however many 15 times a year, really. I mean, the good thing
Bradford do tend to play their women's and their under-19s and reserve games there as well, don't they? Also, predominantly.
They do, and to be fair, they did some kind of free entry stuff around the World Cup games, where you could go and get a beer and watch the game on the screen and stuff. And they had a fair number of people kind of coming in for that. So, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the stadium is what it is. I don't see it changing anytime soon. But then again, I don't necessarily see it ever being worth much less than 850,000 just as a patch of land. I don't see it. I don't see the value, falling and falling. I think it's just a revaluation based on market conditions at the moment. So
trying to get it to a price that can sell it, then you can put on your books next year that you've made money off the sale of Odsal.
Well, I'm going to say it's only 850,000. I mean, how much is in the SLP coffers? It sounds quite cheap.
Well, no, but donations would have to increase. We would welcome donations. We would love to buy Odsal Stadium. We're a big fan of that.
Naming rights and everything.
That plot of land, but. Yeah, and is there anything else from the sort of financial side of things, or do you think it's kind of a case of, like I was mentioning, they've possibly lumped a lot of things together this year to use some of the inbuilt excuses we could see? Now, they're going to be slagged off for the severance package for Nigel Wood, but everyone wanted him to go. So it was a populist thing as much as anything else, and whilst no one thinks he was worth that money to be paid or to be paid off, would we rather have him here than earning a similar amount of money than being gone? And those sorts of things. Is it just the salaries for people that we don't see what they're doing, what value they're adding, like Barwick and stuff? That's the only other real concern here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's employment contracts and law and that kind of stuff. So there probably wasn't a massive amount of choice if you wanted to get rid of him. That's just the nature of it. I mean, obviously you need to look at why those contracts were signed and in that kind of value, but that's a separate issue and that's a historical thing. I think what would be interesting. I mean, obviously they talked about investment in infrastructure. I don't know what, because obviously there's the talk to the move to the Etihad. I don't know what they've spent to facilitate that. I don't know what.
Well, obviously, anything they've spent, they haven't made any recoup on a potential sale of Redhall yet either, which would be a future income. So yeah, right. Well, I mean, we don't know much more about that, but it is a little bit scary, certainly worrying, but hopefully brighter times ahead.
Yes.
Grassroots rugby league, though, in England. What's gone on there, Alan?
So it says Grassroots Rugby League in England will receive £20 million as part of the investment in the 2021 Rugby League World Cup. A pot of £25 million from the UK government, which includes £15 million towards the staging of the tournament, will steer money towards community projects. The competition's chief executive, John Dutton, said the government's £10 million for the grassroots pot will be leveraged to increase the overall figure to £20 million. Dutton says the details of how the funds will be spent is to be split into two categories. And that's small grants of up to £15,000 to fund things like kit and equipment for clubs. They want to set up new teams, including youth sides, girls teams, and wheelchair participation. And then major projects upwards of £15,000 for things such as new pitches, clubhouses, or floodlighting. It says clubs can apply with their project ideas to request funding.
Yeah, I'm sure all the clubs out there, the community clubs, will have seen this kind of news story and be aware of what they need to do to get involved. One thing I don't understand is how 10 million is going to turn to 20 million.
It's going to be leveraged.
so basically, let's say we've got 10 million for sure. I think that's a really positive thing. I think it's nowadays major events and stuff, you have to talk about legacy and that sort of stuff. We probably let ourselves down a little bit on the legacy of the 2013 World Cup. That's an understatement. In fact, we let ourselves down massively, certainly in the development areas. One of the themes that came out of the wider announcement around this World Cup stuff is that it's going to be a more Heartlands focused, but it's going to be a more city focused. So, but London is going to get a few games too. So what I'm anticipating is possibly Cumbria might not see the same kind of amount of games. Places like Cumbria, places, smaller towns like Featherstone, Castleford, Lee, maybe, I don't know. Those kind of places might be more looking at the Women's World Cup alongside of it, and we must be hoping and pushing for the PDRL to be able to get a World Cup together as well for 2021, because that would give those sorts of spaces more opportunity to be involved in the festival, in the party, as it were, because you've got to anticipate that the larger towns and the cities, so we're thinking Hull, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, are going to be the focus of those events. You would have to expect, wouldn't you?
You would, but you'd see. I mean, if you're talking about a city focus, you're talking about any city that has potentially a semi-pro team in it. So you're looking possibly Newcastle, you're looking possibly Coventry, you're looking places like that as well.
Of course,
arguably.
And then off the background of that, this is kind of like setting up the ability for community clubs to invest ahead of the World Cup, so that you can jump on board to that legacy when it comes about. Do you get what I mean?
I mean, obviously you've got to assume we talk about small grants of up to 15,000. I mean, obviously you don't know how the money is going to be split in terms of, are you going to try to spread it far and wide, or are you going to have a couple of major projects that are going to be your kind of flagships? that might take up a fair percentage of the overall pot. I guess that's a balance that